It's hard for me to understand how this trip ever happened in the first place, and how I ended up being the one to run it. For the heck of it, I had put together a short film on the 2017 Cuba trip and posted it on Facebook. Well, that sort of snowball rolling downhill. All of my friends would make comments saying like, when are we going to go next? Or when are you going to leave this trip? And well, Jesse was through. He wasn't going to run another trip. So I said, let me look into it. The first thing I had to do was to find out how many people might be interested. And I got maybe 10 or 12 people at that time. And I sent out a questionnaire asking them what dates would work. And I got 2 or 3 that looked like they were good. So I looked around on the internet and I found a company out in California that handled the Avalon boats and other ones that were out in the Cuba waters. And I said, okay, these are the dates. And they came back and said, well, none of those weeks work for our boats that we have available. That was kind of a problem. Later on, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I was on the internet and I found a company called Dive the World that handled Cuba trips also. And I saw that they had a chat box down there, so I checked down the chat box and said, hi. And they came right back and said, hello. And I asked them questions, says, are you a real person? And I got the response back that says, well, last time I checked. So anyway, we started talking. I gave him the dates and he said, well, and I also told the story about not having available boats for those dates. And they said, let us get back in touch with you. And well, within 24 hours, I got a note back from them saying, yes, our people talked to their people, and the Avalon fleet has decided they would open up the Avalon IV boat just for your group. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. Apparently, they're a pretty big operation with a lot of clout. So, that was easy. All we had to do was pay the boat some money, go find our airline tickets, find a place to stay in Havana, do our tours, and then go diving. But then, there was that Dorothy moment when everything started to fall apart.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
We realized that diving in Cuba is not like going to Cozumel. The U.S. and Cuban governments don't get along very well. They seem to take turns putting up blockades for people that want to visit. Just to qualify to get into Cuba, we had to get an OFAC license and choose one of 15 categories in a travel affidavit. We were told to choose humanitarian projects. U.S. insurance isn't recognized in Cuba. Thankfully, airline tickets come with a policy that is valid in Cuba. Dan USA can't respond to emergencies, but if a problem arises and they're called, they refer it to Dan World, who will respond. Finding hotels in Havana is a bit like juggling hand grenades. Government-owned hotels like Hotel Nacional and Hotel Telegrafo, where we stayed in 2017, are strictly off-limits to U.S. citizens, although Craig and Betsy ignored that on our return from the boat. Because of this problem with hotels, I asked Jesse his advice. He referred me to Celia Garcia of Tropic Vedetta, who had worked with us on our 2017 trip. So I contacted Celia, and between us, we settled on a charming boutique hotel in the center of Old Havana, Posada de Chacon. Celia booked 6 rooms for us, and as more people joined, they just went online and booked their own rooms. After it was all over, we had booked the entire hotel. Not only that, 2 of them, Betsy and Craig, had to go find a different location. On our first night in Havana, the group went across the street to eat at a nice restaurant called Ivan Chef Justo. Celia and I had become friends of sorts over the 2 months before the trip. She was going to go to England, but her boots were too worn out for hiking. She asked if I could buy her some Timberline boots. I did, and at dinner that night, I gave them to her. It was an interesting night. Monica has a thing for cemeteries and never lets one pass her by without a visit. Several of us tagged along and learned some very interesting history from a local guide.
Siempre soñé de tenerte aquí toda la vida juntita a mí. Tanto amor.
No trip to Havana should ignore a visit to Finca Vigia, which translates to Lookout Farm. The feel and history of Papa Ernest is deep and rich. His famous boat, the Pilar, was the centerpiece of Hemmingway's plot to sink a German sub during World War II. He thought that his boat, fully manned and heavily armed, but disguised for fishing, would attract the attention of a German submarine. The sub would signal the Pilar to come alongside in order to requisition supplies of fresh water and food. As the sub approached, Hemingway's men would machine gun the crew on deck, while another man would throw a small bomb into the conning tower. Fortunately, for both Hemingway and the Germans, he never actually encountered an enemy submarine.
So we're going to talk about the cigar factory.
This cigar factory, yeah.
So I will say that I wasn't really looking forward to it, to be honest, because it sounded kind of boring. But it was really interesting seeing that operation had been more or less the same for like decades and decades. I mean, it was fascinating. Probably the same little rolling trays and everything. But this is what happened to me. I was up there watching them roll, and I took a couple pictures, which I know we're not supposed to.
Yeah, I know we weren't supposed to do that.
But anyway, you have to. So
everybody did.
Yeah. And I'm just sitting there watching this guy, and real quickly he stood up and he wrapped up. So what happens is they have the inner tobacco. That's the stuff that smokes, and they've got a one outer layer, and then once that's put on, I think somebody else puts on like a decorative outer layer. Well, he had gotten to the point where it was like a structural, functional cigar, and he wasn't the person who makes them pretty, but he was watching me watch him, and the door was just behind him, between us, and he wrapped it up in some paper and slipped it to me real quick. So I've got a half-made cigar.
Okay, you're going to give me a photo of that, right?
I'll get you a photo of it. And then I realized they probably would have appreciated like some money. And then I went to our tour guide and I said, I don't really want to tell you what happened, but can I get this guy a tip or something? She said, you see those monitors up there, they watch the workers, and if they have any interaction with the tourists, they might lose their jobs. So,
okay.
But I have to say that weighed heavily on me for the rest of the trip. One, because I thought it was a nice gesture of him, and a couple bucks wouldn't have hurt me, and two, it weighed on me for being kind of a tourist dumbass for not being ready with a tip. So this was super fascinating to me. This was actually probably one of the highlights of my trip. I mean, I enjoyed everything else, but it's out kind of in the middle of nowhere. So you get on the boat in this harbor, and then you kind of head out to the middle of nowhere to this little series of islands. And we go out, and so we were kind of stationed in a lagoon where we anchored. There's a little tiny marina, and then we take one of the tenders to our dive spots. And damn it, if there wasn't a boat just like the Flame out there anchored in the middle of nowhere, and it turns out that it was the Spree.
Yeah.
And so obviously I work on the Fling, and I've been working on it for a while, this breed just kind of left. And there was a rumor going around that it was found in Cuba without the engines in it, on a riverbank. Yeah, but that's not what happened. It got either sold or I'm sure sold to a nonprofit. They do some kind of, they were doing research in corals around Cuba. But it was really cool. I had one of the crew from our boat take me over there, and I met their engineer, the captain, and they showed me around all the engine room. And in the past couple of years, I've become really intimate with everything that's under the deck on the boat. And so it was pretty interesting to see all that. And a lot of it is just the same stuff. I mean, it was kind of fascinating. Yeah. So,
I think we all just looked over there, and of course everybody's got photos of it.
Yeah.
It's really it was a cool experience.
It was,
and serendipity.
Yeah. Well, I didn't remember it until today when you brought it up about the Vigia. So we went out to, it was between dives.
Yeah, it was between dives. We were doing a surface interval.
Between dives, doing the surface interval. And we went out and there were all the lizards, and there are these little things that look like nutria that we have in Texas, but they're called Vigia. And,
like big rats.
Big rats. I like to think I have a really kind of special connection with small animals, dogs, cats, and in this instance, rats. So I was filming them, and I went up and had a little piece of melon.
I think it was a mango.
I think it was a mango, and fed him. And then at some point, while I was taking a picture and holding it, he jumped over the fruit, grabbed my knuckle, and then I don't think I have this on video. I was looking for it. And then I picked him up, and he went flying over my head and went back into the water. He survived.
Everybody was wondering whether or not we were going to have to get Alex involved.
Yeah. I lost a little bit of skin. Who else got hurt?
Jan and also Monica both got nibbled on their fingers.
Was that before or after?
Yours was the final episode.
So I should have known better. Damn
it. Sharp teeth, huh?
Now what would a trip be without more troubles? COVID ran rampant, some were down for the count. I lost a day of diving. It wasn't so much the problem going down, but it was much more scarier when I couldn't equalize going up. Definitely put me back a day. We also had some simple injuries on the boat, which became more. Simple twist ankle, which was more of a broken foot. That being said, Jan was great. She actually fought through it and kept diving. We had to have one person get really sick after the trip and needed surgery, but sounds like he's doing better now.
I've been asked to make a few comments about our 2023 trip to Cuba. I would tell you from a personal perspective, one of my greatest highlights was to spend 10 quality days with my son Mark. You don't get an opportunity to do that often in your life as your children are growing up. I'm kind of an interloper on this Houston dive group from Cincinnati, Ohio. Cuba I've been to 3 times. The first time on a motorcycle trip in about 2014, the second time in 2017, and then this last summer. It's changed quite a bit. It's really, I have great admiration for the Cuban people. They're some of the most resourceful, innovative, creative people that I've ever met. I think that, so as we travel the globe, we have often asked every participant to bring along some school supplies and toys for the kids. We've had some wonderful experiences. I think most recently in Indonesia, I typically bring balloons, and a balloon is a cheap, wonderful toy for kids. We did that again this year, past year in Cuba. We visited both a school and an orphanage, and everybody brought some school supplies, plus games for the kids. I solicited some friends of mine, and I brought 3 baseball bits and some hardballs, because I know a bunch of the Cuban people love their baseball. But it's heartwarming to be able to share with some of the people in undeveloped countries that don't have the blessings that we have in this country.
We could go with Mark Arnold before, but we never met his wife, Tracy. Tracy and I really bonded. Tracy was a little apprehensive at first. She had to go a whole lot. And I thought to begin with, I hope she's going to enjoy this trip. But by the end, Tracy had done a marvelous job. And she would, her confidence level had been boosted greatly. But that was a lot of fun. I really enjoy diving with Carl and Mark. Mark is Carl's son, and he's crazier than Carl, I think, and I just absolutely love him to death. And he's so sarcastic, and that's my opinion. So the crocodile was probably the highlight though of my trip. Once Jesse told me years ago he snorkeled with a crocodile. Like, I'm pretty adventurous, and I said, no crocodile. But guess who went in the water with a crocodile? So that was really fun, and I'd have to say it's one of the highlights of my life, getting in the water with that crocodile. But the diving was wonderful, and we had a great time with good friends.
Oh, I remember I was filming this crocodile. It made this turn, and it came back to me right to my face, and I'm filming at the same time, and I could hear Tracy in the boat going, Carl, Carl, Carl. And right at the end of the video, you could just see me bailing out on this thing. They're pretty ferocious looking.
On our last day in Cuba, Craig and Betsy invited 12 of the group over to Hotel Nacional for drinks and socialization. Afterward, we went to the Buena Vista Social Club. It was a great way to end our trip.
Howdy folks, Alex Kendig here. I had the privilege to have my first liveaboard with the crew from Hups, and we did it down in Cuba. It was a great trip. We had many great dives and many adventures. For me, it was my second time to Cuba, and those who have never been, it's a very poor country, and you can really see how the U.S. embargo has affected this once beautiful country. It's turned a lot of areas almost into ruins. The people are strong, but you must remember that they're in a communist country, which brings me to my first bit of travel advice. Don't declare all the materials you're bringing in. Our first challenge, or hiccup, was all the cameras, but even worse was the memory cards. They don't like capitalistic propaganda brought into their country, Dennis. Once that little snafu was taken care of, we got out and were able to get to our hotel. We were able to go explore Cuba, and Andy and I found a delicious restaurant with some live music. We were the only ones there. It was almost like a private show just for us, with some great Cuban music, some salsa, and some great food. We had lobster. It was a great experience. Now, beyond what we did on land, we also got to the liveaboard and we had some great dives. This liveaboard experience in Cuba also gave me a couple firsts. The first one being Goliath grouper. Having such a big fish sneak up on you in the dead of night was quite the experience. I'm pretty sure I lost a couple years of life every time he snuck up on me and brushed against me.
Monica seemed to be developing deep feelings for the Goliaths, and they seemed to be reciprocating. Brian, Scott, Eileen, and others did their share of fish petting too.
While under the water, there's plenty of times to also work on your photography and videography. For example, the cave of baitfish was quite difficult always because it's a very dark area and with very shiny silvery fish. I'm pretty sure my picture did not come out too well as I don't have a lot of great experience with that.
Alex and I entered the cave just about at the same time. I was kind of watching him to see what was going on, and I was pleased to see that his frog kicks were perfect for not stirring up any of the sand.
One of the interesting things about this trip were all the ancient black corals that we found. But in this particular site, what I found interesting as an earth scientist were all the steeply sided, deeply seated pinnacles, this one here rising to about 100 feet in depth. That's too deep for them to be growing now. So what that means is that they were growing from the last ice age when the sea levels were about 200 or 300 feet lower than they are now. And they kept rising until they finally were drowned out because they couldn't keep up with the sea level rise. In Cuba, we had 2 night dives. The first, I used ultraviolet lights and no filters, which is what you see here. And the second, I used the traditional underwater blue spectrum with yellow filters on both my camera and on my mask. Let me explain. Here we have a light spectrum with ultraviolet on the right and infrared on the left. So the traditional black light, which is for mineral fluorescence, is in the UV spectrum. Its emission range can be the entire visible spectrum. However, for bioluminescence, there is a green fluorescence protein which is excited with blue spectrum, and its emission band is in the green spectrum. So this is the UV light, which is purple, and the emitted, excited spectrum is only in cyan. As you can see here on all of these specimens, they appear to be the same. However, when we switch to the blue light with the yellow barrier filters, then you see the traditional green fluorescence protein revealing the green aura amongst all of these hard corals. However, here you can see some yellow in the base, and then with this beautiful gorgonian, a deep red color.
Finally, after the third try, we did get to snorkel with the croc. So Dennis had done a video about Cuba, and in the video there was a segment where the crocodile was going after the chicken, and it ran directly into his GoPro.
He's the one that's half in and half out, but I was right on the surface, wide angle.
So, okay, for
up against him.
Man on the spot, we need to find out what it is today that you found that was a little bit different.
Well, there was this croc that was about as far from me as you are.
That sounds like a croc.
His mouth was like this, and his one eye was looking at me, and I was like, okay, is this it? Am I toast? But no, I lived to tell the story. And there will be a video news at 6.
You believe in that?
Yes, I was there with him.
Okay, you walked away.
Yes, I swam away.
Swam away.
Swam away unscathed by the grace of God.
Imposible no elegirte, ahora que estás aquí. Te quiero decir, te elijo a ti. Si me dan a elegir, te elijo a ti. Para poder vivir, te elijo a ti. Es lo que me hace sentir, te elijo a ti. Te quiero, 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 te quiero decir que te quiero, te quiero, te quiero, te quiero, te quiero.
Dennis and Monica and I are on the right-hand side of the boat in the water, and the croc was on the left-hand side. And you can see him go down to the bottom, and then he comes up right beside us.
Para poder vivir, te elijo a ti, es lo que me hace sentir, te elijo a ti. Te elijo a ti.
Marty, we're going. We're going.
Te elijo a ti. Te elijo a ti.
Then we had the sharks. Everybody told me, all my friends that have been there said, yeah, you'll see lots of sharks. And on the checkout dive, there weren't any sharks, and I was a little disappointed. And then I shouldn't have been, because every dive thereafter, we constantly had sharks. They would almost lead you, like they knew where you were going, like they were your tour guides. And then as you would go up to your safety stop, they would go up to the boat, and you would look up and you would see all these sharks circling around the boat, and you're coming up in the middle of them, and there was no fear in them and no fear in us. We were perfectly comfortable, and we've all got video of these sharks everywhere. And they would take, and as you're diving along, they would come up beside you from behind and turn right in front of you, or they'd come straight to you, and they'd get like 3 foot away and turn away. It was really cool. And then we had Laverne, which was the Goliath grouper. And she was another one of our tour guides, and super curious. And on the night dive, there was a remora come out of the dark and shot around me, and I wasn't sure what it was. I was hoping it wasn't a cookie cutter, And it came out again, shot around me again. So the third time I thought, well, if it takes the same path, I'm going to get it this time on GoPro. And I stuck my GoPro up and it ran into it. And so I was like, well, it's gone. So I started swimming along again. And all of a sudden something bull rushed me from behind. And I thought to myself, oh no, this might not be good. And looked over and it was Laverne, and it's like, oh, thank goodness, hello Laverne. And so I started petting her, because with Laverne, either you petted her or she was going to pet you, so there was no option there. And then she saw Andy and Monica's bigger lights over there, and so she made a mad dash for them and was all over them. And Andy, he was trying to get around her, so there's actually a picture of it. It looks like he's riding her cowboy because he's trying to get over to get away from the